Welcome in everyone, this is Sean with MTG808 Jr. and today we're going to be taking a look at a blue-red control build with some new additions from the Dominaria set. Before we jump into that though, just want to make sure that everyone is aware of our Patreon subscription page. All of the work that we do is supported 100% by our Patreon subscribers, including the scholarship tournaments that we run and all the youth Magic tournaments that we run, as well as all the content that we create. So big shout out to Ryan Harada, who became our 13th Patreon gold subscriber, brought us a little bit closer to our 400 a month goal. Once we hit 400 a month, we will for sure be able to run 2 scholarship tournaments next school year. So shout out to Ryan for helping us reach that goal. And if you support the work that we do, if you like the content that we create, please consider becoming a Patreon. Even just $1 a month helps out immensely, and you will get a sticker sent to you, and you will have access to our monthly expenditure report, so you'll see how we're spending our money. All right, that being said, we're going to jump over here and take a look at Blue-Red Control, complete with new Dominaria cards. It got 2 sweet additions from Dominaria, which we'll talk about in a minute. You can find this text version of the deck in the description, but for now we're going to take a look over here at Magic Online. So I guess we got 3 sweet additions from Dominaria. The first and most important one is probably Gitu Chronicler. So we did a deck tech on this deck last season. I believe we did a gameplay video where we played against this deck as well. And one of the big problems with this deck was that it had a pile of removal, it had a pile of counter spells, but it really needed a way to kind of bridge to the late game to make sure that it could transition from stabilizing the board to ending the game. And the big expensive creatures at common are not as powerful as they might be in regular constructed formats. So this deck kind of struggled with turning the corner, and I think that Gitu Chronicler is going to help a lot in that regard. So it's a 2-mana 1/3. You can play it as a 2-mana 1/3, though I would not recommend it unless you're getting completely run over by creatures or you're mana screwed. The reason we're playing this card is for its kicker. So for 4 mana, you can kick it, so 6 total mana. When it enters the battlefield, return target instant or sorcery card from your graveyard to your hand. Luckily, this deck has 24 instants that you can get back, so this is going to be better than drawing a card because you know what card you're going to get. If you need card draw, you can get card draw. If you need more counter spells to just kind of lock the game up, you can get those. If you need a specific removal spell or a bounce spell, you can get that. So Gitu Chronicler, really, really solid card. I'm really happy with this addition to the deck. It kind of gives us redundancy on the things that we need, specifically card draw. So this isn't a new addition from Dominaria, but it is an update from the last version of this deck that we played. We're playing 4 Hieroglyphic Illuminations, and we've spoken a lot about this in previous videos. The fact that it's an instant is really important because we want to leave our mana up for removal or counter spells. And then if they don't play something that we want to counter or remove, we can still put that mana to use by drawing cards at the end of their turn. Hieroglyphic Illumination is especially sweet because if you're mana screwed, you can cycle it to see a new card. But if you have the time and the mana, you can spend the 4 mana to get the card advantage, right? You're spending 1 card to draw 2 cards. It's card advantage. So Hieroglyphic Illumination is kind of one of the big cruxes of this deck to kind of help us bridge to the late game. We are playing more lands than most decks, so even if we trade 1-for-1 with all of our opponent's stuff, that still doesn't automatically mean that we're going to win, because the odds of us getting mana flooded are much higher than our opponents getting mana flooded. So even if we answer the first 7 threats that they have, if they draw their 8th threat and we draw 3 lands in a row, we're still going to be in some trouble. So we need to have card draw to help us kind of get through our make our land drops to get to 7 mana to play our big finisher. and having these card draw spells are important. Hieroglyphic Illumination is so nice with cycling, but we kind of just need redundancy on this effect, so we're playing Inspiration as well. This is legal in the format because it was in the 2017 starter decks. It was also in a number of previous sets at Common as well, so don't go busting packs, current standard packs, looking for this card, but it is pretty easy to get your hands on. So 4 mana, instant, target player draws 2 cards, just redundant copies of Hieroglyphic Illumination. Again, the problem that this deck was having was bridging to the late game, and having more 4 mana draw 2s, I think is going to help a lot with that. And G2 Chronicler having more 4 mana draw 2s to get back. Really going to help us just put the game away, bury our opponents in card advantage, help get us to our end game finishers. The second sweet addition from Dominaria here is Blink of an Eye. 2 mana, instant, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. You can kick it for an additional 2 mana, and if it was kicked, you draw a card. Right, so if you're kind of behind and you need to cast this for 2 mana, it's a perfectly reasonable spell. You're losing some card advantage on it because they get their card back. You put this card into your graveyard. So you are losing card advantage if you don't kick it, but if you do have the time and the mana to kick it, you're not losing a card. You're gaining tempo, and you're net even on cards, right? You're spending this card, you're drawing a card. So Blink of an Eye, really, really good at just kind of helping us keep the board under control in the mid game. Again, kind of bridging us, helping us see more cards of our deck to help us hit those land drops, get to our big 7 mana finisher. The last card that we are playing here from Dominaria is Sheevan Fire. 1 mana instant. Sheevan Fire deals 2 damage to target creature. If you can kick it for 4 additional mana. If it was kicked, it deals 4 damage to that creature instead. So it's 1 mana to deal 2 damage to a creature, or 5 mana to deal 4 damage to a creature. Having that kind of flexibility in a card is really good, especially in a format like Standard Pauper, where the majority of the metagame is aggro decks, and you just want to make sure that you have cheap interaction to slow down those aggro decks from having their insanely fast starts. However, at the same time, you want to make sure that you have enough cards in your deck to kind of answer the mid-range threats that people might have. The red deck plays a 3 mana 3/2 that becomes a 4/4 if they only have 1 card in their hand. Sheevan Fire is a real nice answer to that card. Some of the green decks that we haven't seen many green decks have success, but Sheevan Fire, being able to kill a 4 toughness creature makes it much better against the green decks. There's a bunch of pirates with 3 toughness that Sheevan Fire can answer at 5 mana that Magma Spray cannot. So Sheevan Fire gives us some flexibility. I don't think we want too many of them, mostly because Magma Spray is so good in the metagame. So one of the big advantages that control decks have is that once the metagame is firmly established, they can kind of build their deck to have the right set of answers for that metagame. We have seen mono white take down our championship scholarship tournament and the tournament before that in the hands of Kyle. Congratulations to Kyle. And Magma Spray is one of the best answers that you can have against that mono white deck, because they play Sacred Cat and they play Unwavering Initiate that are really, really good on curve, right? They're actually slightly above average on curve, and then they also have the bonus of having Embalm to come back later in the game to give the deck really good late game as well. So Magma Spray just kind of puts an end to those shenanigans. I'm very convinced that this is better than Shock in this archetype, because this deck almost never wants to go to the opponent's face. This deck is pretty much always going to win with a Striped Riverwinder. You're not going to win by burning your opponent with Shock or Lightning Strike. So we are playing 3 Magma Spray and 2 Sheevan Fire, 0 Shocks. Got a couple more, 1 more Sheevan Fire, 1 more Magma Spray on the board. Here, the 2-drop slots, this hasn't changed from our last video. Essence Scatter, just having a straight, clean answer to creatures. Pretty much every deck in Standard Pauper besides this control deck plays the majority of their deck as creatures. Having clean answers to them is great. It's really important to kill hexproof creatures with this, right? Jade Guardian, this deck can't really answer a Jade Guardian if it resolves, so you need to make sure you have Essence Scatter for it. And, just if your opponent top decks a creature and you have this waiting for it, it's going to feel good, especially if they spent more than 2 mana on their creature. Unquenchable Thirst. We're playing 7 deserts, but you don't need deserts for this card to be good in this deck because we're not trying to attack. We're just trying to not die, so your opponent is going to be tapping their creatures to attack you anyway, so even if you don't have a desert, you can slap this on a tapped creature. It's going to stop attacking you, right? If you do have a desert, you can tap their creature before it starts attacking you, and then you've essentially answered any creature here. So answering any creature, almost any creature for 2 mana, great ability of Unquenchable Thirst. Lightning Strike, just 2 mana, deal 3 damage to any target. Can't say too much more about Lightning Strike. It's great. We're only playing 2 cancels because, as we said, you build your control decks for an expected metagame. The expected metagame of Standard Pauper is mostly aggressive decks, so cancel is not great in a deck full of 1 and 2 mana spells. However, cancel is still just really, really strong, so we do want some number of them in the main deck. We do have 2 more in the sideboard. Yes, you can see my sideboard. Okay, here. We do have 2 more in the sideboard, so, if your opponent is playing a mid-range deck, you just bring in the 2 cancels, and they're going to be amazing. But yeah, that is the main deck of our control deck. We're playing 7 cycle lands and 24 total lands, so hopefully the cycle lands will help keep you from getting too mana flooded. But we do want the deserts to turn on Unquenchable Thirst. Striped Riverwinder, I guess we'll talk about this. It's our finisher of choice. Hexproof means that all of your opponent's creature removal is going to just sit in their hand and not be able to do very much against this. 7 mana is kind of a lot, but a 7 mana 5/5 with Hexproof, it's going to be really hard for them to answer, right? Outside of a counterspell or a Death Touch creature, there isn't very much that's going to be able to kill this. Maybe a pump spell will be able to take it down, but we play so much removal that by the time you're playing this and getting it into combat, odds are that it's just going to dominate the board. And it does have cycling, so if you draw it early, you're mana screwed, you're way off from getting 7 mana. Don't be afraid to cycle this card to help you hit land drops, get answers, get control of the board, and then when you draw your second and third ones, they should be able to put the game away. But that being said, we have not really seen any of the students have too much success with playing Control. Control is one of the harder archetypes to kind of play because you need to just know how to evaluate your opponent's threats. You need to know how to prioritize using your mana, right? Deciding, do I want to use my removal spell or counterspell this turn, or do I want to take the turn off to draw a card, right? Knowing how to kind of anticipate how you're going to use your mana over the next couple turns. These are all really important elements of playing Control. And Control plays from behind very often, and that can be a tough spot for a lot of younger players to kind of deal with. So we haven't seen too many of the younger kids have success with Control, but I still stand by my affirmation that I think Control is a very powerful archetype for this format. Moving on to the sideboard, we had Wall of Forgotten Pharaohs as a 4 of in previous builds of this deck. I think G2 Chronicler is a better main deck card. Wall of Forgotten Pharaohs, especially if they take out some spot removal against you, Wall of Forgotten Pharaohs is going to be good in the board. If they side into answers for Striped Riverwinder, we want to have a couple more ways to eventually win the game, so Wall of Forgotten Pharaohs will do that. Another win condition in the sideboard is Soul of the Rapids, 5 mana 3/2 flying hexproof, right? If we just absolutely need to have more ways to win, we've got some more in the sideboard. As I said, Cancel is going to be great against other slow decks. Negate is good against other decks, especially other decks with counter spells. We've got more cheap removal here in the sideboard for those aggressive decks. Dual Shot, very good against 1 toughness decks, like the mono black deck. The mono red deck has a lot of 1 toughness creatures. Magma Spray, very good against the embalmed creatures. Sheevan Fire, very flexible against the decks with cheap creatures and mid-range creatures. And then we've got 2 Shatters in here, very good at answering equipment, very good at answering vehicles. So, you know, a very solid list, blue-red control. Would love to hear what you guys think of the list. Would love to hear if you guys have had any success with the list. But especially with the addition of Gitu Chronicler, playing a little bit more card draw and having more smoothing with Blink of an Eye. You know, Blink of an Eye is seeing play in the standard control decks, so it's good enough for real standard. It's a very, very welcome addition for standard Pauper. You know, I think that this deck is playing lots of really powerful cards. It's got a powerful game plan. I would be surprised if this was not a contender for the metagame. So, thank you for stopping by. Make sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed our content. Make sure to hit that subscribe button if you want to stay up to date on all of the standard Pauper happenings. And once again, shameless plug for our Patreon page. What we do here is 100% funded by Patreon subscriptions. All of the youth tournaments that we run, all of the scholarship that we give away, 100% Patreon subscription. So please consider becoming a Patreon. Check us out. And thank you for stopping by, and we will catch you later. Peace.